Today we're going to dig into this ancient story from the book of Genesis. And look, it's a wild ride. We're talking betrayal, power, prison, the whole shebang. But hidden inside is this really surprising lesson about what success actually looks like, especially when it feels like your whole world is falling apart.
So let's start with a question that kind of frames this whole thing. Is it possible for your situation to get objectively, measurably worse, but at the very same time for you to get better, more effective, and in a really weird way, more prosperous? Just keep that question in the back of your mind as we go.
All right, so our story kicks off with this young guy named Joseph, and his life is just awful. He's been betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery in Egypt, and he winds up in the house of a man named Potiphar. And this isn't just anybody. Potiphar is the captain of the Pharaoh's guard. I mean, from Joseph's perspective, things couldn't get much worse. But right out of the gate, the story throws us a total curveball. It says that even though he's a slave, Joseph was a prosperous man. Now, this has nothing to do with money. It's talking about this kind of divine favor, this effectiveness that just starts to become, well, impossible for people to ignore. And it was so obvious, in fact, that his own master, Potiphar, saw it clear as day. He could see that basically everything Joseph was involved with just worked. So, in what has to be a pretty shocking move, he promotes this foreign slave to be the manager of his entire estate.
And we're not talking about partial trust here. The source says Potiphar put 100% of everything he owned into Joseph's hands. It gets to the point where the only thing Potiphar even knew about was the food he ate every day. Think about that. That is absolute total trust built completely on what he could see in Joseph.
So Joseph is basically at the peak of his power in Potiphar's world. But this, of course, is right where the story pivots. A huge test is coming, and it's not about his skills, it's about his character. And things escalate fast. Potiphar's wife wants to have an affair with Joseph. He refuses, but she doesn't give up. She asks him day after day. Finally, she corners him when they're alone in the house. He literally runs away to escape, and in her rage, she completely flips the script and falsely accuses him of doing the exact thing he refused to do.
Now pay close attention to Joseph's reasoning here. When he says no to her, it's not just about being loyal to his boss. He asks, how can I do this and sin against God? His integrity, his entire moral compass is based on this higher loyalty. And that decision is about to cost him everything.
And just like that, his world completely falls apart. For doing the right thing, for showing unshakable integrity, he gets hit with the worst possible consequence. It's just a brutal injustice.
Potiphar, furious after hearing his wife's lie, has Joseph thrown into the royal prison. This is the big one, the place for the king's personal prisoners, a dark, hopeless dungeon. He's gone from running a massive estate back down to the absolute bottom. In fact, he's even lower now than when he first showed up in Egypt.
But this is where the story reveals its most powerful and, honestly, its most confusing point. You'd think this is the end of Joseph's so-called prosperity, right? But it's not even close. The narrative brings back that crucial phrase. Right after telling us he's been thrown in prison, it says, "But the Lord was with Joseph." His circumstances had taken a nosedive, but the one constant in his story, that divine presence, was still there. And what happens next is just unbelievable. The exact same pattern starts all over again. The head prison keeper starts to see the same competence, the same favor in Joseph that Potiphar did. And before long, he trusts him so much that he puts Joseph in charge of the entire prison.
Okay, so this slide just lays out the paradox perfectly. You see the pattern, right? The location changes, but the story is the same. In Potiphar's house, he's the head steward, and what happens? The whole house prospers. In the king's prison, he's put in charge of the prisoners, and what's the result? The whole prison runs smoothly. His external status just craters, but his internal effectiveness, that divine favor, it's undeniable no matter where he is.
And the text doesn't leave us guessing why. It tells us straight up. The prison keeper didn't have to worry about a single thing under Joseph's watch, because it was obvious that some higher power was making everything he did succeed. So, what are we supposed to do with all this? What's the ultimate lesson about prosperity and hardship that this ancient story is trying to teach us?
Well, first, we have to completely redefine that key word. Prosperity in this story isn't about having a nice house or a big bank account. It's a state of divine favor. It's an effectiveness that shines through no matter how bad your external circumstances get. It makes you a person people can trust, even in a prison. So here's the core message, the real kicker.
God doesn't just snap his fingers and rescue Joseph from his problems. Actually, after Joseph does the right thing, his problems get worse. But, and this is the paradox, at that exact same time, he is prospered. That divine favor on him becomes so strong, so obvious, that even a prison warden can see it and decides to hand him the keys.
And that really just leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This story completely challenges our modern definition of success, doesn't it? It forces us to ask, what does it really mean to succeed? Not when things are great, but when your circumstances are at their absolute worst.